A few months ago, I decided to apply for a job in a warehouse. The warehouse was located in the outskirts of my town. It had only been opened for about a month before I started working. And before that, the building used to belong to a company that, well, nobody really ever knew. But they had since moved out. I was very excited when I got the job. In fact, I was surprised by the fact that I got the job fairly quick. After my interview, they called me back and said I could start the next day. When I arrived for my first day at work, Maxwell, the person who had hired me, introduced me to the other staff members. I was surprised to see that in such a big warehouse, there were only 5 employees. Maxwell, the manager, Rose and Amanda, who worked in the office area as secretaries, and they dealt with all online related things, and Ray and I. Ray and I had been hired the exact same day, and we were told that we would deal with many different things, such as packing, loading, handling, all that stuff. And Maxwell did tell us that he would be hiring more people in the next few days. But due to the fact that we had been some of the first people that were hired, we would technically be considered the seniors and would have major responsibilities, especially when it came to instructing people when Maxwell was not around. At first, I kinda thought that was weird. I'd never seen any place do that before, but since the warehouse was so new, I didn't think much of it. And definitely, my mind was at ease when we got told that we would be making extra money. Ray and I went to his office to sign our contracts. However, before we did so, Maxwell had some important instructions to give us. He explained to us that although the warehouse was very big, we were limited to the amount of space where we could go store things. He showed us a map of the warehouse, so that the warehouse only had 1 floor, but it had about 6 rooms in total. When you first entered the place, you had the reception and then 3 different rooms. One was Maxwell's office, the other one was for Rose and Amanda, and the last one was the bathrooms. Afterwards, there was another door that guided you to the storage rooms. One of the rooms was for packages that we had to send, and the other room was for packages that were sent to us. And the room that was left, well, we had no idea what it was. We simply got told not to go in there. Now, this didn't sound like a problem at first, but the thing that was weird is how much emphasis Maxwell put in not to go in there under any circumstances. Some people might think of this as a red flag, but I've worked in places that also had restricted areas, so, I was fine with it. Maxwell made us sign a contract with all of our duties and rules, including, of course, the rule of not going into that one particular room. Both Ray and I signed it. The first couple of days at work were fine, although there was so much to do. Even if the warehouse was rather new and our town was small, we gathered packages for other small towns nearby as well. So Ray and I definitely had a lot on our plates. Luckily, Maxwell was already in the process of interviewing some people. The hiring process with them was also very fast, just like it was with me. And in just about 13 days, Maxwell had hired 5 other employees. The other 5 employees that were hired had the same tasks as Ray and I, so they also had a bit to do of everything. There was a guy called Bentley and a girl called Melisa. Just like Ray, they were in their early 20s. Another one, Zachary, was a divorced man in his 40s just like me. And the other 2 were actually a couple in their 50s, Jason and Bobbilynn. Most of them were very nice people. The 3 older people were very hardworking. The younger ones, including Ray, well, they were nice, but they did slack at times, which was quite annoying. Regardless, all of us did get along easily, and I basically ended up with manager-like responsibilities most of the time, because Maxwell always left so early. He was always there from 10 to 4 p.m., but he never stayed a minute more than that. The rest of us normally worked until 6 p.m., so Ray and I were kind of in charge. But, well, the truth is that it was just technically me. I didn't mind this so much because, to be honest, it was easy, and I've always enjoyed guiding people. There was just one thing about the job that seemed really odd. Rose and Amanda, the two women who worked as secretaries, always seemed to have some sort of privilege over the rest of us. Their job was always lighter. Even when they had nothing to do, Maxwell didn't put them in to help us in the warehouse, especially when we asked for favors. They would just decline. Basically, they would never move their asses off their chairs. Well, also, they had the same schedule as Maxwell, arriving late and leaving early. His favoritism with them was so obvious, but I just guessed it was because they must have known each other for a long time. However, I'm a pretty curious person, so I had asked Maxwell about Rose and Amanda. I asked him if he was friends with them. Maxwell just told me they were just people he had hired before me. Nothing less, nothing more. But I didn't believe in his answer, although I didn't dig any further either. Now, about 2 months passed, and everything at the warehouse seemed normal. However, there was this one day. It was about lunchtime, and we were all having lunch together, except for Maxwell, Amanda, and Rose, who were always apart. While we were eating, the discussion of, "What do you think is in the empty room?" started. Most of us didn't have much to say. However, the younger employees, Ray, Bentley, and Melisa, were fascinated by the topic. Bentley suggested that we should try to open the door to find out what was behind it. When he said this, I immediately told him that he couldn't, and reminded him that it was in our contracts. Bentley, however, kept insisting that we would do it quietly and nobody would know. I put my foot down and told him no, and eventually he said it was all a joke. But I'm not stupid. I knew this curiosity could go somewhere. And the other thing I noticed was how Ray was quiet and thoughtful all the way through the discussion. I already knew Ray enough to know every time he was too quiet, he was up to something. I knew he was also curious and wanted to know why we couldn't go into that room. He brought up the question a few times, so I definitely thought it was strange how he didn't speak when Bentley and Melisa spoke about it. That night, when we finished our shifts, I was in a hurry and wanted to close the place as soon as possible, since I was normally the one who closed the warehouse. However, Bentley was taking ages to appear. Apparently, he was in the bathroom. All the other staff had left. It was just Ray and Melisa, Bentley, and I there. I waited 10 more minutes, but I couldn't wait forever for these kids. Ray then told me he would close. Now, I like to be the one who closed the place because I was just a bit more careful. But I figured it was okay since he had done it before. I ended up agreeing and was about to leave when suddenly, Melisa, who was there with Ray, and I asked if I could give her a lift. Ray looked surprised. "Aren't you riding with us like always?" he asked Melisa. "No, I just remembered I had things to do," she said nervously. Melisa and I said goodbye to Ray, and then we left in my car. The next day, when we arrived to work, I couldn't help but notice that Ray and Bentley weren't there. I had asked Melisa if she knew something, but she just told me they hadn't been answering their phones. I could tell Melisa was kind of worried, so I pushed her to tell me the truth. She confessed that they stayed at work later in order to go into the forbidden room. She was going to do it as well, but she got scared and asked me to take her home. Later that day, Maxwell came and spoke to us, saying that he had fired Bentley and Ray because they disobeyed orders. I found it strange that he had found out about it so soon. But, well, I guess he had seen it on a camera or something. Everybody was a bit shocked, but what was even stranger was how nervous Maxwell seemed to be. His body language was so off, he wouldn't stop looking around, and he seemed sweaty. He also let us know that Rose and Amanda wouldn't be working there anymore. I asked him if we would hire new workers, to what he quickly replied with a, no, we're just fine the way we are. That day we kept working hard just like always, but there was something that felt strange. It wasn't not the fact that we were 4 people down, it was just the whole atmosphere. Something about the warehouse felt uneasy, but I couldn't exactly point out what it was. Regardless, we kept working normally. When it was time to close, I didn't see Zachary. I checked the whole building and nothing. But I didn't worry because sometimes he left earlier without letting me know. So I closed the place and that was it. The next day, Zachary didn't show up to work, which I thought was very weird considering that he didn't say anything to me the day before. Normally, I'd asked Maxwell, but he wasn't there that day. Maxwell texted me earlier in the morning saying that he wasn't going to come to work, and I called Maxwell to ask him if he knew about Zachary, and he just replied by saying Zachary had quit the day before. Now that took me by surprise, and I wasn't buying it since Zachary seemed quite content at work. He was a damn hard worker. He seemed to enjoy the place. Now I asked Maxwell for Zachary's phone number, but he told me it was against the company policies to hand out employees' personal information. I, however, wasn't going to stay there doing nothing, so I went to talk to Melisa, who always had the news about everything that had happened around, but she didn't have his number either. Although, she did say something that was very curious. It's a shame that Zachary quit and Bentley and Ray got fired. We all got along so well. I guess it's because all of us were just lonely people, she said. Now I asked her to elaborate on that statement. She then told me, well, none of us really have anybody if you think about it. Ray didn't have friends or family. Bentley was cut off by his family. I don't ever get along with my folks. You and Zachary are divorced and barely have contact with any of your relatives. Jason and Bobbilynn never had any children. What Melisa said was very worrisome for 2 reasons. It was an extreme coincidence that all the employees in this place didn't have friends or family. But what was even stranger was the fact that this was not unbeknownst to the company, as prior to hiring, they did ask us about our personal background and other random things. This set off an alarm in me, because I wasn't buying the fact that this was a coincidence. Throughout the whole day, I worked normally. I just felt off. I wanted to figure out a couple of things, and so I sneaked into Maxwell's office to look around. In his office, I noticed he had a camera security system. I, myself, have worked in security, so I knew how to use them and decided to go back and check what happened the night when Ray and Bentley stayed after hours. Conveniently, the footage from that evening was deleted, and strangely so was the footage from last afternoon, which meant I couldn't check at what time Zachary left. There were too many red flags out here. I decided to keep looking at the footage for a while, but this time I was just watching the current cameras. When I noticed the time, it was 6 p.m. I was about to go tell the rest of the employees that we should call it a day. And then I saw something strange on the camera. The door to the secret room that we weren't supposed to go in was open. I didn't understand how this happened, but focused on looking for something new. Oddly enough, the cameras began to glitch and the electricity flickered on and off. But that's not it. I could still see the screens and notice someone walking slowly through the hallway. It was hard to see, but this person seemed to be naked. He was dark and tall, around 6'4", very slim. You could almost see his ribcage, but he walked crouching over like he had a huge hump in his back. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. For a second, I thought that I was either imagining it, or that there was something wrong with the CCTV. There was no chance that a naked random man that was slumped over could be roaming around the warehouse. I was contemplating whether to stay observing or to check it out myself, when I noticed this man open the door towards one of the other rooms, the room where Melisa was currently working in alone. At this moment, I knew that I needed to go check on her, so I stood up and ran as quickly as I could. While I was running there, I heard a scream, and quickly I was met by Jason and Bobbilynn, who were now in the hallway, accidentally blocking my way to Melisa, asking me what was happening. I screamed at them, "Get out of the building, fast!" and I kept on running. Once I got into the room, I could hear Melisa still screaming. I followed the screams to see her sitting on the floor against the corner, and that creepy-looking thing was right in front of me, going after her. I stood still for a second. I'd never seen such a thing in my entire life. It was tall, and his arms were unnaturally long. It was completely naked, so I could see his dark and wrinkly skin perfectly. His shape resembled a human, but there was no way he was one. He was sickly malformed, and his face was contorted so much that his one side of the mouth was up near his left eye, and the rest of his mouth was drooping slightly. There was a strand of dangling drool coming out of it as well. He kept moving towards Melisa when I finally reacted, and so I reached one of the boxes that were next to me and I threw it at his head. He turned toward me, and his face confirmed it all. Whatever this creature was, it was something not natural. It was something that shouldn't exist on this planet. He hissed when the one box hit him and slowly turned toward me. I quickly grabbed another box, a very heavy one, and I threw it directly at his face. He let out a terrible bassy moan and fell down, grabbing his head. I screamed at Melisa to run, and both of us got out of the room. We ran fast, and we managed to make it outside the warehouse where Jason and Bobbilynn waited, very confused. I gave Melisa my car keys and told her to start it and to take Jason and Bobbilynn with her, as I closed the main gate of the warehouse. I did this quickly and then ran to the car and we drove off. I then called the police from my phone as Melisa told Bobbilynn and Jason what was going on. Right after I talked to the cops, I talked to Maxwell, who said to me the same thing the police said. "A monster? That can't be true. Are you sure it just wasn't a person?" But I kept insisting. Eventually, Maxwell told me he would get in touch with the police and let me know what happens. I drove everybody to their houses and then I went to mine. I was so anxious the whole time and I couldn't stop thinking about that thing I had just seen. I waited for the police to call me, but they didn't. And after about 3 hours of waiting, I texted Maxwell, who simply messaged me saying the situation had been dealt with. I asked him what happened, and he said he would give me more details when we're back at work. However, he did say, "Don't come in for 2 days," which really stressed me, but I assumed it was out of security and he had a lot to deal with. However, a day later, 2 very random things happened. First, I get a call from the police saying that they had found nothing strange at the warehouse, which I knew was bullshit. They just weren't paying attention to what I had said to them. The second thing was that I got a message from Melisa telling me she had been contacted by the police, and they told her the exact same thing. She also told me she had been fired by Maxwell, and knew that Jason and Bobbilynn had been fired as well. I was utterly shocked. I didn't understand how all this was happening. Before I had the chance to ask her why, someone knocked at my door. It was Maxwell who came to tell me the news. He said unfortunately the company who owned the warehouse was no longer going to finance it, so they were kicking everybody out, even him. I asked him regarding the incident, but he said police found nothing, and I insisted and kept telling him my story, but I could notice he was getting upset. Stop digging deeper. There's nothing wrong at the warehouse, and I recommend you stop talking before the police or others think you're crazy, he said in a very strong tone to the point it sounded like a threat. He left my house after that. Now, I thought for many days about what to do, but there was one thing I knew for sure. Going back where that thing wasn't really an option. Eventually, I decided the best thing was just to let it go. I did some digging around town and it seemed like Maxwell is very known, so I didn't want to get on his bad side. About a week after all that happened, Melisa messaged me telling me she had found out 2 things by just doing some research online. 1. Amanda and Rose were Maxwell's wife and daughter, respectively. And if you think that's dodgy, the other news was that apparently Maxwell was the owner of the warehouse, and he had also previously worked at the company that was there before the warehouse. The only thing she could find out about the company was that they did experimental vaccines on animals, which was probably why it was all so hush-hush. After knowing all of this, it was pretty obvious that Maxwell kept a secret at the warehouse. Why? Well, I don't know. But the truth is that I wasn't even worried about his lies and all the illegal activity. I just wanted to know what the creature was. But I faced the fact that I would probably never find out. Bobbilynn and Jason never talked to me again. I assumed that they thought we were crazy after all that. After all, they never saw the thing. Melisa insisted for ages, saying that we needed to tell people the truth and find out what it actually was. But I never replied. And then one day she just stopped texting, and then I read in the newspaper that she had died. A little further investigating through Facebook friends and a couple family members told me that she had committed suicide. I guess that's why I'm here telling you the story. Because she couldn't. Although unlike her, I don't want to reveal too much information about the warehouse, because I actually believe all of us are safer if that creature stays in there.